Okay, now you can see the cable coming out of the window and going up to the detector unit. So before we weren't having a false trigger at that distance. So I don't know what's going on with the unit. It's almost like the unit's misbehaving, the controller. I hooked up the sensor guard unit to the ground rod next to the building, and when the lights turned on and off, it does not trigger their unit. What isn't behaving properly is the condition you're seeing now, with the ground wire hooked up to the ground rod that's away from the building, and I trigger the light and the unit goes into the LD Tech mode, but it doesn't relay out, and it should, every 2 seconds, it should, if there's still a fault, it should trigger out and then reset again. And as long as evidently there's a potential on the bottom collector from the ground rod, the unit stays locked up. So it doesn't cycle out at 2 seconds. Now it did, it just did. For some reason it cycled once. It tripped out and then reset. But the unit was sitting here like this for probably 5 minutes in this mode without timing out. Okay, the fiber is now seated, and I've got everything's upside down here. I got the lid here. It's in the switch is in the up position. I'm going to turn it off and then turn it back on. It starts to self-trigger. You can see I got the LD Tech. Now, a little relay in here, I think it's this relay, is clicking, and the LD Tech light, when the little relay clicks, flashes. So I just have no reason why this thing's going into self-trigger. I'm at the maximum length of my cord going out the window and up the pole. I had with having the light on the fiber and plugging it into the top of the lid, and then the unit not going, was resolved when I run the fiber right into the board itself. I didn't have that trouble. So there was a problem making the two meet. Now it still doesn't, in my mind, doesn't explain why a steady light wouldn't trigger it, but a little flicker of a light would. However, that's resolved, because if I turn the sensitivity down on the fiber now, and then or increase the sensitivity and get a steady light coming from the detector, and I plug it into the board, it does trigger. I just haven't figured out this false trigger thing. And it's Sunday, July 23rd, about 8 o'clock. Okay, with the light, I figured it out. When I turn the light switch on, nothing happens, and when I turn, you're looking at the end of the fiber now, but when I turn it off now, you're going to see a light flash. Now it's not doing it. There it went. Nothing. There's a light. Nothing. There's a light flash. Okay, and this lighting assembly is just a circuit in the wall and a overhead fluorescent light. This thing's doing a self-trigger again, and I don't know why. Okay, this is a test. I got 110 volts coming out of a house circuit in series with a 100-watt light bulb going to the ground rod on the right. So I don't know, that light bulb's glowing at about 10 watts if we wanted to figure out about how much is going on. Ground rod for the collector is right there in the lawn, and then the unit's sitting right here. And it doesn't trigger the unit. However, if you trigger the unit with this voltage present, it may have a tendency to hold it in a trigger mode. And I'll write that all out with a narrative. Okay, this is a fluorescent light test, and you can see that the clock is moving, so the unit's all set up and operating. I got a fluorescent tube here. I'm running off the same circuit off the extension cord. The unit I have split off and fed by this splitter, and then here I'm running the fluorescent tube into a switch. Okay. What's interesting, out at the colony, when we turn the fluorescent tubes off, it triggered the unit. Here, it's when we turn it on. Didn't do it the first time, but it did at that time. It's in disconnect right now. Okay, then it just reset. You can see the clock running again. Okay, so I'm going to shut it off, shut off the fluorescent tube. Nothing happens. That time it didn't do it. That time it went into operational mode. Wait for it to time out. Okay, John, it's locked up again. I don't think it likes this presence of this 110 volts here through the light bulb, so I'll disconnect that, see if it'll reset. It just reset, didn't it?
Yep.
Okay, we'll take that elevated voltage off the ground rod, and now I'm going to shut off the fluorescent light, turn it on, and it triggers the unit. And the unit should reset. The unit doesn't seem to want to reset when there's an elevated voltage on the ground rod. Okay, it's in this locked up state again for some reason. Come on. Come on, reset. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to show you something. You can just stay right there, Carl. I'm going to show you something else with the fluorescent tube. Is I'm going to take the ground reference off the bottom collector. And now I'm going to turn the fluorescent light on and off. No effect on the unit. So we didn't see how a fluorescent light could affect the unit. It seems how they're plugged into the same receptacle, but there hasn't been enough discharge on this circuit to cause the unit to trigger. I don't know if it's because the ballast is in proximity to the unit. It doesn't seem to be, because I'm going to move it just to check it. Okay, the unit's set and operational, and I've taken the fluorescent light fixture and I moved it over here.
Tripped it.
Tripped it. Now, a little while ago, we had it over here, and I could turn the light on and off and wouldn't trip it. There we go.
There, it tripped it.
I want to believe this is distance sensitive, that there's enough discharge in the fluorescent light coming out of the inductor that the detector is actually picking it up. And that is kind of simulated, because if we remove the ground reference both here and out at the Hooterite colony, it doesn't do it. So there's got to be a heck of an impulse coming off of that ballast. Okay, we just learned something interesting. If we move the fluorescent tube in the proximity of the collector, when we turn it on, it triggers the unit. Go ahead and go to standby.